Hi, I'm Eric from Rocky Mountain ATVMC.com, and this is our 2019 Honda CRF450X long-term test and build. So the original Honda CRF450X came out in 2005, and they basically left that bike unchanged until 2017. And so when they announced that the 2019 was coming out, I got really excited. I actually had a chance to ride the 2017 450RX, and I really gelled with that bike. And so basically what I was looking for is a little wider gear ratio and maybe a little less prone to stalling, some more flywheel effect. And everything on paper was saying that's exactly what this bike was. So I was super excited. You know, when we first got the bike, you know, kind of looking at it going, oh man, that looks heavy. That shares a lot with the 450L, which it does. Or like, I'm wondering how much it's gonna weigh. You know, you see the claimed weights and, you know, like, holy crap, you know, that was like 272 pounds. And we're like, well, we better go throw it on the scale. And sure enough, it came in really close to that on the scale. And just for fun, we had a 450XCF there in the shop, and I know it's not exactly the same bike, but it was a brand new bike. It was a 450 from KTM, so I thought, I wonder what that weighs. And we threw that on the scale, and the difference was over 35 pounds, something like that. This was heavier than that bike, and you know, that's a ton of weight for sure. So one of the first things, you know, I'm kind of thinking about is losing weight, right? We know that when we add things to bikes, we actually increase the weight, and so I'm starting to think about maybe taking weight off. And you know, we did a few things right off the bat. It had some plastic case covers on it, and you look at that wondering how much weight comes off with that, and then the exhaust, and there's just the normal things you kind of think of. And we started doing some calculations, and I kind of gave up on making it a lightweight bike, and basically turned the build into how I wanted it to handle, what the power characteristics were. You know, suspension, of course, it's a big heavy bike. I need to make the suspension work. And so that's kind of where we really started the build. So when I'm setting this bike up for me, what that means is I'm setting it up for how I like to ride and what type of riding I'm doing. And that kind of brings up another point, is this bike, I've had this bike, you know, of course we race our local desert races here in Utah and the surrounding areas. I love single track, so hard single track. We actually did Idaho this year. We did the Idaho City 100 this year, so anybody that's familiar with that type of riding, actually the bike worked great up there. It works great out here in the desert as well, but I want the ability to go with my girls and go hang out and have a good time on a weekend. I want to be able to go to the sand dunes. I want to, you know, so we need this bike to be really versatile. And if you've watched some of my other builds, that absolutely is versatile, is a very important part of how I like to set these things up. So first off, we need to get this thing ready to go desert racing. So the suspension, the stock suspension was just way too soft. The springs were soft, the valving was soft, and so we sent it off to our friends at Dick's Racing, and Richard Wilkes has some great settings for this Showa suspension. And right, you know, as soon as I bolted it on, I actually bolted it on the night before a race, went out and raced the race, and it felt great. I changed maybe a clicker here and a clicker there, but for the most part, it was spot on. And that helps a ton. You know, it keeps the bike, it's really quite heavy. I'm a big guy, you know, right now I'm probably sitting at 215, 220. And so I definitely need to go up on my spring rates. But anyways, it holds the bike up high in the stroke, and it actually makes it more plush because it lets that suspension move freely in the plush area of the travel, right? So we've got the suspension taken care of. Handles great that way. And then I always put stabilizers on my bike because of the high speeds. You know, you get tired, it's just less scary. And so we have the Scott steering stabilizer. It's the underbar mount. And you know, that brings up another part is the handlebars. So on the underbars, it normally raises your bars almost an inch, just under an inch. And so you put your stock bars on there, now your bars are an inch higher. Back in the day, I used to like my bars high. I'm learning that I can corner better, and the bike actually handles better if I can get my bars down a little bit. So Pro Taper makes the Evo in a steering damper low bend, and it actually is about an inch lower. And so you put that on there, and the difference between the low bend and the high bar mount, it ends up so you are back to your stock height. And I really like that. While we're talking about the handlebars, we got to bring up the hand guards. And these are the Tusk D-Flex Pros. They're a wraparound hand guard. We recently made a change to them. They have a little bit bigger shield to them. I can't ride a bike without wraparound hand guards. I don't know, it's maybe psychological. I don't know exactly what it is. But so protection-wise for this bike, you know, we're racing, we're beating it up, we're on the gnarly single track, we're going over logs and rocks. A skid plate. It had a stock skid plate on it that was okay, but definitely needed more protection. And we went with the Works connection. It's their aluminum skid plate, but it has the rubber isolators. And so, you know, you kind of hear people talk about, you know, you bolt on a rigid skid plate and you lose some of the frame flex and some of that thing. So Works connection has this rubber isolated skid plate that is just bulletproof. Man, I have hit things so hard with this skid plate, and you can hardly tell. There's definitely some gouges and some nicks and some scrapes, but frame's in good shape, cases are in good shape, so it's definitely doing its job. And then we move on, you know, the chain guides. I've actually struggled on these Hondas a little bit with the chain guides. I've ripped a couple off the swing arm, I've bent everything, but the TM Design Works chain guide is by far and away the strongest one on the market right now. And then we have the Tusk disc guard that makes sure it keeps my rotor nice and straight, no wobble to it. So obviously when you look at this bike, one of the first things you see is this enormous looking tank. And to be honest, it looks really big and you think about it all the time, but when you're riding it, it doesn't really feel that big. Your knees are underneath it. It doesn't bulge out too much. It holds 3 gallons. It's the IMS 3 gallon, and it makes it so I can get over 100 miles to a tank, no problem at all. Maybe not that big a range is necessary for our local desert racing, but it sure is nice when we go out on trail rides and things like that. It's just, I don't even worry about how much fuel I have. And then moving on to performance. Okay, when this came, it had a really quiet exhaust, a little choked up, and I knew I needed to get something a little freer flowing, I guess is what we could say. And so one of the first things we did is we put the FMF Quiet Core 4 on here. It does have a quiet insert that's a spark arrestor, and it's if you run it in that configuration, it's not that much louder than stock, but it flows way better. It just has a freer flow to it. Now, when you do that to a bike like this, you have to richen the fuel. And so JD Jetting has their fuel controller. It's called the Power Surge 6X. And so what that does is allows you to increase the fuel to match the freer flowing exhaust. And it also has a small air filter cover that I replaced. It just opens it up a little bit more in there. So the combination of all those things lets it breathe quite a bit better, and to be honest, it gives it a ton of power. It feels like a ton. One more thing I haven't done, but I'm hearing really good results, is when you put the power bomb on it as well. So power bomb header makes it even that much smoother down low and a nice linear feel to it. If you want to get rowdy, you can take out the quiet core if you're on a track, you're in an area that's not controlled by sound. It really does make it bark off the bottom. It might make it a little flatter, but it definitely barks, and I actually have found when I get tired, I'd prefer to ride it with a quiet core in because I can hang on to it for a little longer. But either way, the bike has plenty of power. You know, we're hearing about people going crazy and putting full-on R heads and cylinders and all that stuff and mating it to the 6-speed transmission. And I can't imagine being to that point in my life where I need that much power. I always get tired way before that. But definitely options out there if you want to get crazy. All right, moving on to the wheels and tires. So we have on here the Tusk Recon Hybrid front and rear tires. And for those of you that aren't familiar with what a hybrid tire is, it's something that's kind of come out more recently. It's kind of a combination between maybe a motocross tread and more of a trials tire carcass We're trying, with the Tusk one, we tried to hit maybe a little bit more towards maybe the motocross tire a little bit more. So a little bit stiffer carcass than a full-on trials tire, but still plenty of bump absorption, plenty of the ability for that carcass to flex around and make traction. And so what we have is a tire that just hooks up like you wouldn't believe. More so for probably more like the slick rock or up the canyons and the boulders and the loose stuff. Some of the high-speed desert racing, there's probably better tires out there for that. But for the trail rider, for the extreme stuff, you know, definitely the hybrid is the way to go. And now we have a matching front hybrid to go with it. It's the 9100, so it's kind of fat, and it really absorbs the bumps, and it's actually kind of interesting to ride with the first time. You kind of have to get used to it a little bit and learn to trust it, learn to trust what it's going to soak. I hate getting flat tires. So, you know, most of the time you're fine with like a Bridgestone Ultra Duty tube or something like that. But I want one more level. And so I'm running Moose inserts, and I'm running the Michelins. They've been around for a long time. I've had great luck with them. I know what to expect with them. And so that's kind of my go-to on my foam inserts. And then onto the wheels. So these are the Tusk Impact wheels. Super strong, super durable. They're a great price, and let's face it, they just look good. There's something about the white hubs, black spokes, black rims. I think it looks great, especially on this bike. And speaking of looks, so Attack Graphics is taking really good care of us. If you're gonna go racing, you're gonna need some race numbers, of course. But I love the graphics kit they came up with on this bike. I think it makes it look really sharp. We also have it's the Rocky Mountain seat cover. Actually, I think it goes great with the graphics as well. One more thing is a headlight. So this bike comes stock with a headlight. Headlight's a pretty loose term. When you look in their owner's manual and stuff, they call it's a perfect light for riding at dusk. And that's really what it is. It's like a daytime running light. It is not bright at all. I've never had to ride at dark with it, but I don't think I could. So Baja Designs has their Squadron Sport that actually plugs right in. It goes right in the stock headlight shell. It actually runs off the AC power, so it has an AC to DC converter right on the light. And so it is like a 5-minute install at most. And the light it puts out it's crazy. It's crazy how much light comes out of this thing. So there's a couple more things on here. I put on little blingy things here and there, shifter, brake levers, little engine plugs. Also have primary drive sprockets and chains, so when your stock ones wear out, I think they look great. Our X-ring chain lasts forever, it seems like. But yeah, that's it. This is my build. I've really enjoyed putting this bike together. You know, it's a year. So I was looking at the registration, and it's almost been a year that I've had this bike and been putting it together and riding it and putting time on it and really turning it into the bike that I want. And if you want to outfit your bike similar to this, make sure and go to our website, RockyMountainATVMC.com. And if you like content like this, make sure and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we'll catch you next time.